Hi guys, welcome to biology lesson 4.06, overview of cellular respiration. And I put behind that aerobic because we actually have two kinds of cellular respiration. We have aerobic and we have anaerobic. And aero means air, translates roughly to air. So if we have aerobic cellular respiration, we're talking about cellular respiration. So aerobic means it takes place in with oxygen. Well, why wouldn't it? We always have oxygen, right? Well, actually, there's times where we don't. Early on in the Earth's history, oxygen wasn't in the atmosphere, so they had to figure out a way to make ATP. And let's just remember this whole purpose is cellular respiration is making ATP. That reminds me too, before I get too far into this, I want to pick up a piece of info I left out of the last video. So we said that photosynthesis, I'm just going to put a P, makes glucose. That's used for cellular respiration, which is making ATP. And then that ATP is used to power photosynthesis. One of the things I forgot to talk about was catabolic and anabolic. So glucose is larger. So we consider this, if you compare it to ATP, this is a larger, more complex. So the process of photosynthesis making glucose is going to be anabolic. The process of cellular respiration, where we take that glucose and we break it down, is going to be, so we need to write here anabolic. Cellular respiration is going to be catabolic because we're breaking down that glucose into ATP, carbon dioxide. So again, we've got that cycle. And if you put something together that's anabolic and catabolic, the combination of two of those, we call that metabolism. So metabolism is this flow. All right, so what we're doing is we're talking about making ATP in the presence of oxygen. The other time you may not have oxygen, if you run sprints and track, you get to the end of your sprint, you might be gasping, going, and so maybe you don't have enough oxygen and you have to switch to anaerobic. And in our vocabulary words, we learned that AN means without. So if we put an an in front, anaerobic means without oxygen. And that's going to be the next lesson, 4.07. But let's talk about aerobic. So we said also that our formula, so this is all review, is we take glucose plus oxygen, we get carbon dioxide, you get water, and we get 36 ATP. Now, you'll see different numbers for this, and that's because it depends if you're talking about net ATP, you're talking about gross ATP, or, all ATP. So we just use the number 36. We write this as C6H12O6, which is glucose. Oxygen is written as O2. Carbon dioxide is CO2. Water is H2O. And if we want to balance it, we'd have to put sixes in front. So you should know this both ways. Well, if you remember, photosynthesis takes place in two parts in the chloroplast. The first part takes place in the stroma, or I'm sorry, in the thylakoid membranes, in the thylakoid discs, and that's the light reactions, and then the dark reactions take place in the stroma. Well, let's go with, what color do I want to use next? How about green? Cellular respiration, also aerobic cellular respiration. So AERO, aerobic, I'm just going to put CR, has two phases as well. So I'm going to draw a cell, and this is a eukaryotic cell. And I'm going to put It's got to have a double membrane, mitochondria, inside the cell. So I have phase 1 is called glycolysis. And it takes place in the cytoplasm. Glycolysis, the job for glycolysis is we take the glucose molecule and we split it we split it in half. So let's just say in half. The compound that it turns into, so we get two, so we take, well, I'm not going to write the formula again. Two compounds called pyruvate. So if glucose is C6H12O6 and we split it in half, how many carbon is each pyruvate going to have? That's right, it's going to have 3 carbon. So it would be roughly C3H6O3. Well, why do we do this? Again, let's go back to our tree analogy. So if glucose is like a tree, so if this is like a tree, glucose is large. You don't drag the whole tree into your house and stick it in the fireplace. You have to break it into smaller pieces because we're going to burn the glucose. That's actually kind of what's going to happen. So the first thing we have to do is we have to split it in half. This process is called glycolysis. So glycolysis is the process of splitting that glucose molecule in half in the cytoplasm. Phase 2 takes place in the mitochondria. Now, it's actually got phase 2. Oh, you can't see that. So this is, let me do this. How about that? 2. It goes through actually in the mitochondria 2 phases. The first is called the citric acid cycle, and the second is called electron transport. We're going to leave that off the books, and we're just going to talk about what happens inside the glucose. So we're going to go. It's phases. It's actually 2 and 3, but we're just going to talk about them together. And this is where the pyruvate combines with oxygen. Combines with oxygen. So if you are a camper, you combine stuff with oxygen all the time, and not just any stuff, but a hydrocarbon. So we're going to write this pyruvate. So pyruvate, we said, has 3 carbons. It actually has 4 oxygens. Don't worry about that explanation, but this is where we're going to combine it with oxygen. And we're going to produce all of our products. We're going to get that carbon dioxide, we're going to get water, and we're going to have our, we're actually going to have 34 ATP here. I want to talk about this equation a little bit. So when a compound has carbon and hydrogen, it's called a hydrocarbon. And interestingly enough, if you have your license, you probably you did this reaction. You just had a different hydrocarbon. So what's the hydrocarbon you burn to make your car go? Yeah, so another hydrocarbon would be gas. If you're a camper and you like to go camping, what's the hydrocarbon you like to burn? Firewood. If you have a tank in back of your house, what's the hydrocarbon that you might burn? Propane. And guys, they all have the same equation. We take gas, the formula for gas plus oxygen, we get carbon dioxide, we get water. You burn your firewood, you take that hydrocarbon plus oxygen, you get carbon dioxide, you get water, propane, methane, you name it. What your cells are doing is exactly what you do in your car, is exactly what you do in your campfire. So we did a little bit of a demonstration to highlight this. Uh, what's the big issue right now with gas? We're producing a lot of carbon dioxide, and they say that this is what's getting trapped in the atmosphere and heating up the earth. If we burn propane, we do the same thing. Coal, same formula, same equation. Your mitochondria, there's a reason why we call it the powerhouse of the cell. It is absolutely doing the same thing we do with all of these other reactions, and our products are the same. The only difference is our mitochondria are able to turn this energy into making ATP. So that's kind of cool, right? Think about if you try to do a campfire and it's a still day and there's not a lot of air that gets to your wood, you take a paper plate and you fan it to pump more oxygen in so it can burn. This is the equation. I'm going to go with orange. This is the equation for burning stuff. And there is no chemical difference between what happens in our mitochondria. We should probably add that it takes place in the mitochondria. Takes place in the mitochondria. There is no difference between what our mitochondria do in our cells and what our engines do in our cars, what your campfire ring, what happens in your campfire ring, what happens in your furnace at home. They are all chemically exactly the same. And they produce a lot of energy. Our body then takes the energy and it converts it over to this. So you are a campfire. Well, maybe you noticed I have 34 ATP here. One of the things that we didn't mention is that glycolysis produces 2 ATP. 2 ATP. So we get 34 ATP in the mitochondria for these the second and third phase. We're just going to call it the next phase. And in the first phase, in phase 1, we get 2. All right, so what are our takeaways? Cellular respiration is catabolic. We're breaking down glucose, a large molecule, and turning it into smaller molecules. We can talk about aerobic or anaerobic, and so this lesson was on aerobic, requires air. It requires oxygen. So actually, we take the glucose and we break it down in the presence of oxygen. We get 6 carbon dioxide, we get 6 water, and we get 36 ATP. So it happens in 2 phases. In the cytoplasm, we have glycolysis, where we're splitting that glucose into the 2-pyruvate. And then we take those pyruvate, and inside the mitochondria, we burn them, literally. We combine them with oxygen, just like we do any of these other reactions, and we get most of our ATP. So 90-some% of our ATP comes inside the mitochondria here. So it's a pretty efficient process. And we use this ATP to make everything else happen. So we use it to conduct nerve impulses, to move our muscles, to process and transport for all of our cell functions. This ATP, it's the money. Money makes our economy go round. ATP makes the body go round. And cellular respiration is the process of making ATP. All right, that's all for aerobic cellular respiration. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.